I came to realize that ultimately sales is about that rapport building exercise. It's not about what you're selling per se. It's about your ability to connect with somebody who's looking for what it is that you sell and what you offer and you bring value to. But more importantly, somebody you could build a genuine relationship with. I think everybody has experiences that they bought something that they may have wished they didn't, mainly because they didn't really like the person that was selling it to them. I think now we're in more of a market where consumers and B2B buyers have a lot more of an advantage in who they buy from. So the need to get along with the person on the other end of the Zoom call is increasingly more important. And that was the original thesis we set off with when we had Demand Cap. It was, how do we leverage data to identify who's in market, and then how to have better conversations with those people that ultimately lead to.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ignite podcast. Today we're thrilled to have Chris Anzalone on the program. He's the founder and CEO of Knowledge, joining us. In fair disclosure, that's a portfolio company. He's building one of the most compelling startups in sales intelligence space right now, an AI-powered platform that flips traditional intent data on its head by focusing on individuals, not companies. Before launching Knowledge, Chris scaled demand capture to $1 million of ARR very quickly in just 90 days. Even snagged the legendary domain knowledge.com. There's probably a story behind that, through an unbelievable back channel story. Yep. Today, we'll dive into what he's building, what's broken in B2B sales, and why the future of Outbound is personal. Thanks for coming on, Chris.
Awesome, Brian. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to see you again. So your background is anything but typical, Wall Street, sales agency, then a SaaS founder. Walk us through kind of the through line of that arc.
Yeah, so it was interesting. I went sort of the traditional finance route, tried my footing as an analyst, definitely wasn't my cup of tea. And I sort of stumbled into the capital formation side of finance, really raising money. And it started my career in high ticket sales. And basically, it prepped me for ultimately running an agency, because I was constantly engaging with people with incredibly high net worths, incredibly powerful fund managers, and had to really operate at a high level because these were big ticket deals. And I did that for about a decade and found it just wasn't what I wanted to spend my entire life doing. I just started to get a bit burnt out. Took about a year hiatus, not sure what I wanted to do. And I stumbled across this concept of a go-to-market agency. And at first, the idea that you could set meetings and get paid to set meetings regardless of whether or not they close was this wild idea to me. It was so antithetical to anything I had ever experienced. But in doing some research, it was a big market. And I was blown away by how many mid-sized and enterprise companies struggle to continually develop their pipeline.
Yeah. So, that's an interesting, and I think we connected with this on the Wall Street background. It's interesting. You were actually placing money. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So like I said, I tried the traditional route. I'm like, oh, I'll be a trader. It looks like fun, until you sit in front of a computer screen all day. And it just wasn't for me. I knew I'd never be happy doing it. And I initially started actually raising money for private placements. That was where I sort of cut my teeth, in family offices, high net worth individuals, funds of funds, trying to fund these small startups initially, then eventually moved over to the hedge fund side, started raising money for hedge funds, and then found myself exclusively in capital formation. So managing a book of family offices, high net worth individuals who would invest in various public equity, private equity funds, and sort of ran the gamut there, eventually building a team that would consistently go out and raise money from these different people. And what I found most challenging was that you were calling people who not only had gazillions of dollars, but they were smart. They really knew what they were talking about. So you had to know not just the finance side, you had to have a good general sense of what was going on in the world to be able to build rapport. And I came to realize that ultimately sales is about that rapport building exercise. It's not about what you're selling per se. It's about your ability to connect with somebody who's looking for what it is that you sell and what you offer and you bring value to, but more importantly, somebody you could build a genuine relationship with. I think everybody has experiences that they bought something that they may have wished they didn't, mainly because they didn't really like the person that was selling it to them. I think now we're in more of a market where consumers and B2B buyers have a lot more of an advantage in who they buy from. So the need to get along with the person on the other end of the Zoom call is increasingly more important. And that was the original thesis we set off with when we had Demand Cap. It was, how do we leverage data to identify who's in market, and then how to have better conversations with those people that ultimately lead to revenue.
Yeah, and that's interesting. So you were running a sales agency, and I can see the through line from kind of the finance and Wall Street experience. You realize this is massive enterprise market. Folks are trying to take their products to market. That's really tough. And so what did you discover that kind of led to knowledge as you're running the sales agency? You're running into the same problem that these software companies and other businesses have repeatedly.
Yeah, so through a weird series of events, I ended up getting invited. I think I may have shared this with you offline. I got invited to an event. It was a dinner in New York City. I actually didn't want to go. I almost didn't go. Turns out I get there. I'm one of about 18 people and the only one who is not VP or better at probably a global 200. It was just a room I really had no business being in at that point in my career. But it gave me access to really ask questions of some enterprise CMOs about why agencies were sort of a necessary evil, what they provided, what they didn't, and how larger companies thought about data, specifically intent data, and how they processed it into their workflow. And largely, they lacked the agility of smaller agencies, which allowed smaller agencies to fill in some of that gap in terms of pipeline. But the problem was the deals never converted because they'd get you on a meeting with anybody who was willing to take the call. So I'll never forget, I left that dinner and called the person that was designing our website and said, rip it all down. Nobody cares that we can get into Fed and SLED accounts. Nobody cares how many dials we make. People want meetings that convert, and that's the problem we're going to solve. My first domestic hire at Demand Capture was a kid who was getting his master's in applied mathematics from Courant at NYU. Absolute genius. To call him a kid is probably a misnomer. He ultimately went on, now he's at Anthropic, making more money than most people I know. But he was a kid when he came to work at Demand Capture nonetheless. And we started trying to solve the problem first of how do you identify who's in market? And this was 2022. So put yourself in like the pre-ChatGPT mind frame. So I was able to get my hands on 180 million sales calls, and they all had dispositions. So we would see this person was contacted on this day, and this is what he said to this company. Now that data is wildly valuable, but at the time, people really didn't understand trading data or the value there in these sort of neural models. So we initially took 22 billion rows of intent and back-propagated it against these 180 million sales calls and looked for predictive patterns. What did intent scores look like when someone was saying not interested? What did they look like when someone said, call me in a week? And then what did they look like when someone finally took the meeting? And by making these predictions, we found that our reps were able to set more meetings. The number of meetings was ticking up. So at that point, we just started consuming more data. I'm like, how do we get more data? And in that process, I got this sort of crazy idea looking back at it. But I said, what if we took this obscure data and we matched our sales reps to prospects that have things in common? And I'll never forget, we started with brand preference data. So a super oversimplification is, our rep likes Pepsi more than Coca-Cola. This prospect likes Pepsi more than Coca-Cola. Let's see if they have a better conversation than the rep who likes Coke. And in doing so, we found that the first thing we noticed was the cold calls were longer. They were having longer conversations. And our reps had no idea what they had in common. And again, the Coca-Cola thing is an oversimplification. We ultimately built 4 psychometric models that bring in almost 3,000 individual data points. And we built these models to match our SDRs with the prospects they were most likely to have things in common with, that we were also predicting would be in market. When we did that, the number of meetings that we set skyrocketed. But the coolest thing about it was the lead to opportunity. So, generally an agency, no less, sets a meeting for you. There's like a 1 in 10 chance it becomes an open op. Usually you have to requalify it, and it's rarely a solid prospect. The last year before we exited the agency, our lead to opportunity was 72%. 7 out of 10 effectively. And it was because we were talking to people in the right part of their buying cycle before they were reaching out to like default company who owns that space. And we were targeting them at the right time with the right message. And there was a lot of similarities between our sales reps and our prospects. They all had curated lists, and our average cold call was like 6.5 minutes long. You ever like meet somebody in the first conversation, you're like, oh, I can talk to this person for an hour? We were finding that we were able to produce that at scale. Ultimately, the agency set 10,000 meetings the last year before we exited. But in the process, we built this neural model that ultimately laid the foundation for what became knowledge.
Interesting. So you basically followed this path that I see quite a lot, which is I'm running this agency, solving this business problem. So I build software and tech and AI, machine learning around that problem to solve that problem at scale. And then there's some light bulb moment where you're like, wait, I could sell off this human services business and just go with software. So walk us through kind of that aha moment. Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually might be able to keep my hairline in the process because running an agency was like nothing I've ever done before. Like you get some really talented people, but when you start setting the bar that high with customers, that becomes where the expectation is. And it was just a ton of work. And I'm like, oh, I could turn this into a SaaS business and I won't have to work 90 hours a week. I was right. I don't have to work 90 hours a week. Now I work 100. I thought what I was doing would actually make things easier, and it's wildly challenging. That said, we're scaling quicker than I could have ever scaled a service business in a million years. And we're having a lot of results, I think mainly because, I have an incredible technical talent team, unbelievable co-founders, but we have a lot of on the ground sales experience, which I think not a lot of technical founders tend to have. So we're going into this problem as, well, what would we want if we were selling? And that's largely what we built when we had the agency. Was we built tech that made our sales reps better performing. What that resulted in was, instead of having a sales tool, we ended up building a sales infrastructure that literally improves the output of everything that it touches because the core data is that much better.
What I like about MarTech, sales tech in particular, and I come from that industry, as we've discussed, is you can use your product to sell more of your product. So there's this inherent feedback loop in the product cycle, in the sales cycle of, hey, we're using knowledge to sell knowledge. And then you probably have the situation where you kind of get on a call or a meeting with somebody. How'd you know I was in market? Well, let me tell you, like, we use knowledge to find you.
Yeah, so that's actually been really interesting. Yes, we absolutely use knowledge. It's one of the things that I attribute our growth to. We had 28% ARR growth month over month coming into the month of July. But the reason that we've gotten so effective in our outbound targeting, which is typically a very hard channel to sort of penetrate, is because we're not going through your traditional approach. So, a lot of people now would build a table in Clay and say, oh, this is an SDR. This is the person I should reach out to. But there are so many SDRs and then bombarded with messaging. So what we actually did was we used knowledge to identify account execs, sales reps, business development reps, not who are looking for new sales tech, but who are reading articles about why they missed quota last month, or reading articles about how to get to an account exec from an SDR quicker. And they're looking for that edge, even though they're not asking for it, and putting messaging right in front of them. Our click-through rates are pretty solid, but once somebody clicks through one of our emails, our conversion on our website from those click-throughs is like north of 40%, because the messaging is so tailored to what the needs are. So that's what allowed us to, we got our first 1,000 customers in 4.5 months because we were targeting the exact people with the right messaging, because we used our own tool to do so.
Right. And so it sounds like it's a classic. What you're really solving here is the targeting problem, like getting the right person at the right time on their digital exhaust around the internet, and then sort of targeting them online with the right messaging, converting them on a landing page into your CRM so your SDRs can go qualify them.
So we're entirely a product-led growth model at this point. So it's not even about our SDRs qualifying them. They're signing up for free and then converting and just buying the platform. And we're actually, because of that, I've spoken to about 115 different users. We're expanding our set of integrations to, we're going to be working inside of Clay. For a long time, I thought Clay, it's a brilliant business. Don't get me wrong. The technology's not anything crazy. It's Airtables on steroids. But they built a really good community and people really believe in the product. And I still don't think sending 10,000 emails is the way to go anymore. I just don't think it's effective. That said, a lot of people do still believe in going that route. And because of that, we're building an integration into Clay where you could go and enrich your data. But it's more the targeting I found, which wasn't my initial thesis. My initial thesis was that it was more about the messaging and how you spoke to them. That's still true to an extent. We actually just ran a really interesting case study with one of our customers. They sent 500,000 emails out to high intent leads that they pulled from Apollo with the Bombora intent plugin. They built a list of 5,000 using our neural match, which is what we use for our output. Out of the entire funnel, they ended up converting 9 prospects into closed accounts. With our data set, they converted 26. The copy on the outbound message was identical. Not a word was different in the outbound copy. The only difference is that you were getting in front of 5,000 people who were actively looking for what it was that our customer was selling.
Like a 300x price performance lift.
Yeah,
That's insane.
Massive, on 100 times less emails.
Yeah, that's wild.
With the exact same messaging. Our open rate was 70%.
Wow. And so do you help them craft a message here too, or that was like their own messaging?
No, that was entirely on their own. They're a good customer, and I really was looking for more of those proof points. So it's the reason I've ran enterprise pilots. We're not even charging for our enterprise pilots. It's to get that continual feedback loop to improve the product. And they were sending out a pretty big email campaign, B2C, sort of our ideal customer. And I said, listen, I'll give you the contacts for free. I just want you to benchmark those 500,000 that you're sending out against ours. Don't change anything about the sequence or the message. When I got the results, I just got the results last week. I was utterly blown away by it.
A case study. What an amazing case study. I'm sure you're going to publish something on that. And
for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's insane. And it goes to show you kind of like, as you think about the science and art of go-to-market, right? And, there's only so many people out there that really need your product at any given time, right? Sometimes they don't have the budget right now. Sometimes they don't have the need right now. Sometimes it's the wrong time, all the BANT stuff, right? Sometimes they're not the right person. They can't make the decision. That's the wordy. And sometimes it's just not a match, right? And what you guys do, what'd you call it? Neural match?
Neural match.
Neural match. I like that. So with the neural match, you're basically finding all of those things plus probably, I don't know, like how many factors are in your model? Do you know? Like
almost 3,000.
So 3,000 factors that this big machine learning algorithm is figuring out and matching on 3,000 different factors. Who's in the market right now that needs your product right now? That's pretty amazing, right? This is kind of what we did at Rocket Fuel back in the day, right? With ads. And I don't even think we had 3,000 in our model at the time to predict, hey, if we show you an ad, will you buy a pizza right now kind of thing? This is like, 10, 15 years ago now. But now, the machine learning is a lot more sophisticated and 3,000 different factors.
Last month was 1 trillion rows of data across the model.
1 trillion rows.
The data is so big when we update it takes like weeks of just compute running, cycling. Now it updates daily, but the initial time we moved the data over took like 3.5 weeks. I don't want to.
Amazing. So that means your customers every day have new prospects to go target based on, if you're rerunning that model every single day, there's new things to look at every single day. You don't have to wait 1 week or 1 month for the model to refresh.
ZoomInfo is a great example. Or even 5x5, the big data co-op, all of those companies will do either weekly or monthly data dumps. And then you have to go and sort of parse it out. We're the only one that actually operates in real time. One of the cool features I'm really excited for to roll out here in the next couple of weeks is a Slack integration, where if I have a prospect in my workflow that I'm actively engaging with, actively monitoring, and they visit a competitor's website, or they start doing some more research on the product category, or maybe reviews about my service or solution, it'll ping the rep in real time right in Slack to say, this person just visited your competitor's pricing page. You should probably reel them back in. It also leads to a lot of use cases from like the CS standpoint to watch customers that are churning towards the end of their, the end of their contract. There are a million different use cases for it. We really dove into B2B sales initially because it's the area that I know the most about. I've had a lot of conversations with VCs lately about this idea of like right to win. Like, what's your right to win in this space? What's the domain expertise? Tools like Bolt and Cursor have largely commoditized the ability to churn out software. And because that, it's like, where's the domain expertise that this will actually work? How do you execute upon this? And I think if it wasn't for being able to set 25,000 meetings over the past 3 years, that we wouldn't really have that. But I've heard every objection that exists. I understand the pain that sales reps go through. And we've tried everything from LinkedIn outbound to phone to clay tables, those 10,000 person emails. So we've really solved at the high level the infrastructure necessity for every tool to work.
It's really amazing. What's the implementation look like? So you have these trillions of rows of data at the person level, which is interesting, versus company level. We can talk about that too, that decision. And then, I come along and I'm selling, widget A. What's that implementation look like to match, what I'm selling to one of those trillion? Well, I guess it's trillions of rows of data. It's not trillions of people, but
Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward. The first time you log on to the app, we ask you 9 questions to start building a profile about you as a person. There are questions like, if you were to have a success, are you more likely to be gracious or more likely to think you earned the success? Things like that, to start getting a foundation. At the same time, we're building a profile in the background of our user. We'll then ask you a couple of questions about the product or service that you sell, and that puts you into the app. Now,
And as a person, I'm probably also in your app. So you have thousands of data points on me. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's why. I mean, we'll take, like, we ask for birth data on onboarding. People always ask me, like, why do you ask for birthday? I've never been in a SaaS tool that asks for birthday. It's because there very well could be more than one Brian Bell in our database,
Definitely,
and I want to make sure that we're building a profile around the right one. So we build out this user profile that really has these 4 granular psychometric scores to understand who you are as a person. Then we build out our understanding of the complexities of what you sell. What are your differentiators? What sets you apart in the market? Who are your competitors? From there, you input your ICP. You say, today I want to target fintech that's looking for, my cybersecurity solution. You put in the traditional, I want to talk to directors, I want to talk to VPs, and 50 million to 250 million ARR companies. From there, we go out and do all the heavy lifting in the background, and we'll parse through, first break everything down based upon that ICP, which cuts our tables and our records down tremendously because we could just focus on this smaller subset. From there, we go back and look at everything they've viewed for the past 30 days and look for a certain base level of content consumption. Once we get through that, we start looking at the regularity, the frequency, the depth. We have a weighting system where obviously competitors' pricing pages are weighted higher than, a HubSpot white paper, for instance. But that HubSpot white paper still has relevance. We'll then sort that list based upon the company being in market, the individual being in market, and then our overall neural match score, which is a composite of everything we know about them and your likelihood to close. You could double click into that. We'll give you a bit of insights into, what pain points are they looking to solve based upon their research. What are some high level strategies of how you should engage with them? But from there, you take that list, you push it into your sales engagement tool, whether it's Aircall or HubSpot, wherever, and you engage with those reps. And the lift on your reply rates is astronomical. The lift on the conversions on those calls is astronomical because these are people who are actively out in the market looking for what you sell and haven't started buying it. It's sort of the reason big companies win is they largely win by default. I'll do all my research into cybersecurity, and then when it's time to buy, there's 3 companies I'm going to buy from. And I know to go find those because those are the big 3 companies in the space. It's the reason that Sixth Sense was able to build a business. If you have 50 or 100,000 people on your website, it's great to be able to score them and know who's the best to talk to. But what if you're a small startup and nobody has any idea who you are? You're never going to capture that market organically. So you need to engage with those people. But importantly, you need to engage with them before or close to the time that they're doing that outreach to the big companies that win by default. So we focused on hitting that sweet spot where we say, this is the person you want to talk to, and this is the person you want to talk to now. And by doing so, we've seen across every channel a significant lift in conversion.
That's amazing. You actually bootstrapped this with your own capital. Why go that route, and what did it teach you about going 0 to 1 with a startup and raising capital?
Yeah, I mean, I with my experience raising capital, I knew what I was sort of walking into. Again, that was different when you're raising it for a hedge fund than when you're raising it for yourself. But I made a pretty hefty investment. I didn't take a salary, and then I invested quite a bit out of pocket in building this. And the reason was a couple of things. One, I wanted to be able to build for our users by having conversations with them. I didn't want sort of top-down direction on how to build for the market because I knew what I wanted to solve. And I've seen more reps in my career come through my door who would outwork anyone. They were the first ones in, last ones to leave, and they were never able to really succeed because they were never talking to the right people. And they didn't really know how to approach those people. So I wanted to focus on solving that problem and finding ways to be really capital efficient in doing so. So when we got to the point that we were raising, one, we still had a big chunk of the cap table, but we could be more selective in who we brought on, who we worked with to really scale the company to where I think it should be. I don't want to be another founder that, sells their company for 500 million and after taxes, dilution, and 4 rounds of financing gets 300 grand and a great job. I want more than the LinkedIn post. I'm 42. I'm a little older than a lot of startup founders. Not
That's
much.
That's the actual average startup
Is it
founder.
really?
42.
Well, I didn't know that. I always thought it was younger. Maybe
No,
YC
that's the
and
average.
Techstars makes you think it's younger. But I mean, I feel I'm glad I'm doing it at this age rather than like fresh out of college because I have the bruises of a career and the scars. But I'm a bit more patient now. And that's really what it came down to. I wanted to get to the point where we really had product market fit before we started taking in capital to scale it, as opposed to using other people's money to experiment. And it's the same thing. Like, I brought on two co-founders. They came in about a year in, Alex and Jeremy, two of the smartest people, hands down, I have ever met in my life when it comes to technology, and just unbelievably awesome guys. But when we were talking about what equity looked like, I came back at a number higher than they had originally asked for, intentionally. And the reason was, it's the exact same story as to why I didn't take money in. I wanted to own it and be responsible for it myself. And when I brought in co-founders, and it was the best thing I ever did. When I brought in co-founders, I wanted them to own it. I wanted it to be their product, because you'll always work the hardest for yourself. I'm a big believer in that. So if it was my money on the line, not that I sort of take a pause with other people's money, because I think in my nature, I tend to grind, but I just wanted that additional bit of motivation that at the end of the day, if it didn't work, it was my pocket that it affected. And that pushed me through the times. Look, being a startup founder is the hardest thing I've ever done. And I raised money for a living from people who manage billions of dollars. I really went into this thinking, like, with my background, with my experience, I built a cool product. The market will recognize it. Fundraising will be easy, and we'll go out and crush it. It has been the most emotionally taxing, challenging thing I have ever done. And it takes a level of resilience that I never would. I thought it was going to, I just never thought it was going to be so challenging. And because of that, reflecting back, I'm even more glad that I put everything on the line personally, because it put me in a position where I had to fight through that. And I had to push through that, which allowed us to get to where we are now. Because there were a couple of times that, just in the process, it gets hard. It definitely gets hard.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for the vulnerability and transparency. I'm sure a lot of founders listening will get a lot from what you're saying. It is hard to bootstrap and use your own money without, and I like what you said there, which is, I'm not going to take outside money, take a bunch of dilution so I can experiment with other people's money. I'm going to try to figure out if I have something. And then once I have something, raise money to go after the opportunity. And I think that's kind of where venture capital is today. I think much different 10 or 20 years ago, where you did need to raise money just to go experiment and figure out if there was a market. I think now it's basically, if you have 2 or 3 people that are capable, you can build something, get it down the line, and then raise capital to accelerate it.
Yeah, and that's sort of what we've been seeing. I've spoken to a lot of VCs throughout the process, from very early all the way through when we're actually taking checks in. And what I've seen is every month that we get by with stronger retention numbers and that consistent ARR growth and showing that product market fit, the more comfortable people were like, hey, let me see the data room. Let's start putting this together. Because that's where the validation really lies. I also think there's a lot of validation for us personally in the ZoomInfo relationship. I think I have so much respect for Henry and what he's built over there. His entire team is phenomenal. But we started a partnership 18 months ago, and they put us in their partner marketplace, one of 89 companies. It was like Snowflake, Salesforce, and Knowledge. It was so cool. And over the past month and a half after that launch, that relationship shifted a bit. It's still not competitive, but the partnership is very different now. And it's because I think there's a lot of friction on the narrative. The tools themselves are wildly complementary. I think there's friction on the narrative because at the end of the day, account-based marketing has been sold as the only way to go about selling. And it's not a company that makes that buying decision. It's an individual, especially if you're selling into bigger companies. It's a group of individuals. But those are the people that matter. You can't just rapid fire at 3,000 people at the marketing department in IBM and hope you'll sell them your new MarTech solution. Knowing that they're looking for it doesn't have a tremendous amount of value. You need to know who at that organization is looking for it. So seeing ZoomInfo sort of push off of us a bit and start framing things as maybe frenemies, more competitive than anything else.
Co-opetition, right?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
they're kind of like this platform for all the info, right?
Exactly.
You can go in there, sort, filter, collate, create lists, and lists of people, lists of companies, and then you just kind of work down the list. But they don't have that neural engine in the background matching everything.
It goes against their approach to selling, which is very much account-based. Everything inside of all their platforms is account-based. And I'm a big believer that people buy from people. And that's where that narrative friction lied, is that we're really tackling intent head on. Intent was supposed to be the holy grail of sales. We'll tell you who wants to buy, and you have a million companies selling it. There's really a couple of different types of intent. There's, they were on your website, which is lead scoring. I think that's the Six Senses of the world.
Yeah, we've had that since the Marketo days.
Yeah, exactly. Tons of respect for Adam Robinson and what he built with RB2B. But that's because Adam's a hell of a salesman and knows how to build a great company, not because the technology. I mean, the technology existed 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And then you have the more traditional intent providers, the account-based, largely noise that works through Bidstream and Clickstream and different partnerships.
Demand base is another one out there.
Yeah. And those are great. Like if I want to send out marketing emails, those are good tools to run ads on a DSP and send out marketing emails. But the reason that salespeople hate intent is because it never converted for salespeople. But that's because it wasn't meant to. Intent was made as a marketing tool for big companies to use to market. Then they tried to repackage it and sell it as a sales tool. And I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to, especially small businesses, who would buy ZoomInfo or another tool and say, I turned on the intent score said 100. I called the guy and he said, yeah, not interested, and hung up on me. I don't understand what happened. And that was the promise that was made. Oh, well, it's high intent. They must want to buy from you. And it never worked because it was never meant to work that way. Where I think knowledge is so different and our neural match, intent is one small component. Sure, we look at what the organization is doing and take that into our scoring model. But we look at the behavior of the individuals, and then rather than just describing the activity, we predict what the future activity will be. So when you're reaching out to someone that's in that part of the buying cycle right before they engage with the big dominant companies in the space, we've been able to predict that behavior and validate that behavior across the buyer's journey. So now when people are using knowledge and reaching out to, high match prospects, they're finding much better results because the person they're calling actually was the one doing the research, as opposed to just some generic person at IBM.
Amazing. So PLG for outbound tools is still rare. What's been surprising about targeting individual reps versus execs?
I think what's been most interesting for me, I call them guerrilla pilots. We've seen so much growth within organizations where we'll get like one random rep from either LinkedIn outreach or an email, and they'll sign up, and then 2 weeks later we'll have like 3, and then the next week we'll have 5. Oracle's a great example. Like we got one SDR from Oracle. Now we have 11 people in sales in Oracle that use knowledge every day. I've never spoken to anybody over there. I've never targeted them. They weren't even target list.
How are you pricing it? Is it cheap enough where reps can kind of get started and then you'll land an enterprise deal later? Or like how are you pricing it?
Yeah, so it's a $79 per seat per month. I actually do a lot. If people reach out to me and open that sort of channel of communication for product feedback, I'll always throw a couple of months here, big discounts where I can, because to me, that's
there's a free trial, it sounds like, as well.
Yeah, it's a free trial. The functionality is somewhat limited. We won't give you access to all of the filters. So you can see the power of the data, but not actually utilize it. I mean, I think you and I spoke about it, but when we launched our V1, our average session time on the platform was 29 and a half minutes. 29 and a half minutes, people were taking so much value, they didn't have to buy it. It was great for all the people using it to sell, not so much for us. So we found sort of that sweet spot. But yeah, it's a free to sign up. You get the trial. You can convert that to the paid. I'm always looking for additional feedback. But it was intentionally priced at that point where SDRs can buy it themselves and improve their own quota. It also works as a standalone. So if you don't have access to, if you can't integrate it to your team's Salesforce without someone in IT signing off, it still works as a standalone application that you could then use in all of your tools. You could export as a CSV and do a lot of those things. The reason I call them guerrilla pilots is because once we break that $1 million ARR threshold, we have plans to stand up a full sales-led growth team to work in coordination with our PLG model. And those companies that have 11, 15, 20 reps using it every day, those are the first companies we're calling because we've effectively already ran a pilot. They have 20 individuals who have been paying for it for a year. Go look at their numbers compared to anybody else. So that proof is already baked right in, which I think will make the sales-led growth model that much easier to spin up.
I love that.
Yeah, I think sales was really just where we chose to get started because of my level of familiarity with sales. I think the ability to understand the behavior of people and predict their behavior in terms of buying, in terms of research, is broadly applicable to everything from identifying fundraisers, identifying people who are actively looking to make investments, all the way through, team composition.
People investing in early stage venture funds?
Exactly. I think it's one of the reasons that we were so set on framing it as an infrastructure piece is because of the broad application. Like AI is interesting. there were a lot of promises made around what AI and AI SDRs and AI agents would do. And I've seen mixed results at best. There are some tools that
I just had a postmortem of one this morning that went out of business. One of my only B2B software companies that they pivoted away ultimately from the AI SDR, which they got really great initial traction. And then they realized it was ineffective and people were churning. And I've had another company in my portfolio, Hyperbound. They came on the podcast to talk about their AI SDR. And then they came back on the podcast about a year later to talk about their pivot towards what they do now, which is sales training. But yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a great.
It's a tough spot. We don't need more like bots reaching out to us. We need more people reaching out to us that know exactly what we need when we need it. You know.
That's ultimately what this all comes down to for me, is that in the age of AI, people are craving human engagement. And that's what the bet is. The bet is that people will ultimately want to talk to human beings more than they'll want to talk to computers. For those who do think that AI will buy from AI, I mean, there are VCs that's literally their entire thesis. And not like sizable VCs who that's their entire thesis. So we made sure to build what was an infrastructure tool that improves any engagement. For me, for my sales team, we're picking up the phone and making the phone call, because I think ultimately that connection is what leads not just to the sale, but to the retention. Having someone, we often had the debate, is it better to have somebody that's a CS person or just work with your AE? And I said, every time I've ever been asked, keep the AE on. I know functionally it's challenging for an organization, but that person throughout the buying journey, especially if it's a big software investment, you end up building this rapport. That's the reason people stay with companies. That's the reason they don't churn. So it'll take a lot to convince me that's not the future. The future isn't more humans talking to more humans in the right context, understanding what their problems are at the right time. And I think that's really where the world of AI is going to take us. I often hear conversations about, what about the privacy aspect of it? Do I want someone to know everything that I'm looking at and where I am? And the example that I give is when I was buying my car. This is a true story. When I was buying my car, I had spoken to the dealer and he gave me a good number. I knew the car I wanted. Everything was set. That morning, I was scrolling through Instagram and I got an ad for another dealership not far from my house. Same car. It was like $3,500 less. Same model, same everything. I called the dealer and I'm like, is it for real? He goes, yeah. I went there and bought the car that right there on the spot within 2 hours. And I think back at that and I reflect on it because I think people ultimately want contextual things put in front of them. It's like if you've ever been on the internet in Europe, it's like you're looking for a nice restaurant and you're getting ads for a toaster oven. There's no relevance and no context. I think people have come to appreciate highly relative engagement, and it feels less salesy when someone's calling to solve a problem that you genuinely have. And knowledge.
I would love to reach out to family offices looking for early stage venture capital. That'd be perfect. If I knew that they're actively looking to deploy, I just don't know. There's 11,000 family offices out there. Which ones are looking to actively deploy an early stage venture capital? I have no idea.
Yeah, and that's literally exactly what we built for that. I mean, not that use case per se, but I've had people use it for looking for HR managers that are looking for specific types of candidates. It's a use case that I eventually thought we may build for, but they use knowledge as is to do that. Utilizing, looking for new LPs or family offices. There are use cases to do that. And that's what I mean, that the understanding of human behavior, that's what the uniqueness of the platform is. That's what Jeremy and Alex were able to really build. And I mean, I don't know if I've touched on this. I'm sure you and I have spoken on it, but Alex was leadership at Lamb Research, then was one of the leaders at Reality Labs. So pre-Llama, pre-ChatGPT, working in the AI space. Brilliant engineer and just mind. And Jeremy ran 250 engineers for CVS Health during COVID. He deploys software and updates quicker than any person I've ever seen in my entire life. And really what they were able to do is build this engine that identifies specific behavior just by telling it what you want to look for. So whether it's looking for family offices that are looking to deploy capital or looking for specific hiring managers that are looking for a unique kind of candidate, we have the ability to process 1 trillion rows a month of data and identify who all of those individuals are. From there, it's about being a human being and having the conversation.
Any lessons from building and exiting before that you're playing differently this time around?
I think the biggest lesson that I took is be meticulous about everything. And the first time I built the agency, it was a lot of, all right, well, let's just scale quickly and then we'll go back and sort of fill in the gaps that we need and the different pieces. And it ended up being more work than it was to fill in the things that should have been done right the first time. So now, like, we brought ADP in day one. We brought Cooley in for legal day one, and really built as if we were already where we wanted to be. And that's, I think, the biggest way I could sort of summarize it, was to build not for where you are as an organization, but where you foresee yourself going. And in doing so, VCs take us more seriously, customers take us more seriously. Everything is structured. Everything is, nothing is done sort of, for lack of a better word, sort of half-assed. Everything is done. I mean, you've seen it in our emails. Like, you and I will shoot, a sentence back and forth. But when we first met, emails were rigid and structured and answered every question and every bullet. And that level of communication and sort of professionalism and expertise in every facet gives people comfort with a new company. And it allows you to get to the point where you could do some great things. Everything I've done with this company has been about relationships. The ZoomInfo partnership was because Henry saw the vision of what we were building before we ever had a product. And the reason I was able to bring on unbelievable co-founders who could, they both left unbelievable, well-paying jobs to come work here and build this. And it's because of the relationships that we were able to build. So I've just really focused on the relationship aspect and the professionalism. And I think that's been the biggest lesson that I've taken from how I did things, exit one versus what things will look like exit two.
So speaking of, fundraising, you've turned down money from accelerators, walked away from checks that weren't strategic. What are you optimizing for in investors right now?
So I think right now, because of the way our growth is tracking, we'll likely hit 4 million ARR just off of this initial pre-seed round. Most likely, we won't need to raise a seed round. So that space where you go from the accelerators, and the accelerators are probably a bad example, but you go through, like tier 3 capital, step up to tier 2 capital, and then you are opening doors with those tier 1 VCs. Because we don't have a seed round to sort of take us from, step 1 to where we're going, we've been really strategic in looking for VCs that have comfort operating at those levels, that can see the path from pre-seed to Series A, because we're sort of skipping a step in the process, which has really narrowed down the window of people we feel comfortable talking with. They have to be able to see that vision. I think that's super important. And then with when it comes to...
So your intention is basically to skip the seed and just go straight to A in a couple of years.
I don't think we're going... I mean, at 4 million ARR in a year, with what those growth numbers look like, I think we'll be able to do a well-priced, Series A without raising any capital in the interim. We have really efficient, like, everything we've built is efficient. Again, it goes back to bootstrapping. It was my money for a year and a half. So there's no excess capital. If it doesn't have an ROI and there's a way to beat that number down, it's been beaten to hell. And because of that, we're just really capital efficient, and it lets us get to a place where we probably don't need that interim round. So it's really people who can bridge the gap there. And it's really VCs who are a bit contrarian, maybe, in the way that they look at where the human in the loop sits in an age of AI. I think some people are sort of narrow in this idea that everything's going to be agentic, everything is going to be AI doing everything, where I think AI is a tool to make the human in the loop that much better and that much more effective. It's not a replacement. And that's what I think we learned from a lot of these AI SDR companies. Yeah, they look great on paper, but at the end of the day, like, we're products of millions of years of evolution. There are things about humans that humans are 1,000 years from understanding. And because of that, machines can attempt to feel human, but they can't replicate the intricacies. And until that's solved, which I don't think we'll see in our lifetime, people will ultimately want to do business with people and not machines.
Yeah, or even if you could solve it, and you had the super intelligent SDR that sounded and behaved perfectly as a human, until it can completely synthetically imitate a human, all of our nuances and all of our preferences, it's going to be, humans are always just going to want to talk to humans. Now, it could be a human that's empowered by a huge swarm of agents underneath the cranium, I guess. And it's not under the hood, but under the cranium. But it's still going to be human to human. It's going to be humans talking to humans.
Yeah, because we're the product of experience, right? Like, all of us, we're who we are today because of the experiences we've had in life. How do you replicate that? How do you find, with data will always be imperfect, how do you find that perfect match, that point that you could build a conversation around with artificial intelligence? It's challenging. I think at the end of the day, there's a term that's, you'll probably know, for the space between animation and realism, uncanny valley.
Uncanny
And
Valley.
Uncanny Valley is, they talk a lot about that movie Polar Express with Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
And they say Uncanny Valley is this place where it's animation, but it feels too real. It's not real, but it's not animation. And it makes people instinctually uncomfortable. And it's the reason that you see it in various movies and various engagements.
That's why you stay at the Pixar level, and it kind of like you can tell it's a cartoon, but it looks, very, very high, high end, but it's still a cartoon.
And when you push it, you end up with Polar Express. Uncanny Valley is like this, I don't know if it's a psychological term, but it's this instinctual knowing something just isn't right. And I don't know how we solve for that in AI. I don't know.
Well, that's so well said, Chris. I'm so glad you brought that up. It's like all the comments on LinkedIn,
Yeah, exactly.
It's just instinctually, you're like, I can detect it. Like I go to my LinkedIn notification, I'm like, gosh, that's not a real comment. That's not a real comment. This guy's actually saying something real here,
And it's so nuanced that you can't, it's not formulaic. You can't say like, oh, if I put a comma here, all of a sudden it seems more human. It's all in relation to everything else. So because the communication is so intertwined with all of these other pieces in the universe, we instinctually know when something is real and human and when it's not. And the comments are a great example. I look and I'm like, hey, there's no way a person said that. It seems like a person's thought, but that's not how people talk. I can never explain to you why it's not how people talk, but I know like in my gut that that's not a person. And we have those instincts. And again, those instincts are like the product of millions of years of evolution. So I don't think we're going to get to a point where that can be faked, if not for a very, very, very long time. And even then in that world, people's preference will be to talk to a human.
Let's wrap up with a rapid fire.
Awesome.
What was the biggest unlock in converting from a services-based business to software?
The biggest unlock in converting from a services-based business to software, I would say, is the ability to take messaging, make small iterations, and scale quickly. When we were doing outreach over a phone, you would need to spend a week making 1,000 phone calls to find enough data to make an incremental change and go back there and change it. As with PLG models and expansive outbound, we can make those changes very, very quickly and optimize for results in like near real time.
What's been the hardest challenge bootstrapping with your own cash?
Thinking through every dollar, being able to move quickly, but still being hyper thoughtful, because at the end of the day, it's your money. So you have to execute quickly. You can't sit on decisions for weeks on end. But at the end of the day, you have that instinctual hesitation because you're the one writing the check.
I know that feeling. Yeah, I'm living that right now. I'm basically bootstrapping Team Ignite. Your favorite user interview insight so far?
Favorite user interview insight. I had a user tell me that they built a relationship and closed a guy because the prospect watched an interview about Cobra Kai. I've never seen the show, but just the way it happened, the way the story was told to me was basically inside of knowledge. It said the prospect was watching an interview like 2 weeks prior for an hour about Cobra Kai. The rep called the prospect and just happened to say like, hey, I hope you had a great weekend. I actually spent the weekend watching Cobra Kai with my girlfriend who had never seen it. Now they're like best Cobra Kai friends, and they're constantly talking about the show and like past episodes.
Instant rapport.
And by the way, he closed them.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because like your guard is down. It gives you that opener.
Yeah, I mean the opener is everything. And I did have another person reached out and said, talking to prospects through knowledge feels like talking to myself. And that was really cool too. Just hearing that like we were able to target people that had that much similarity in personality, where it led to like these organic conversations. It would make a hell of a dating app.
Yeah, maybe it's knowledge. Yeah, like in the future, right? Yeah, we got trillions of rows of data. We're gonna find your perfect match. Match.com by knowledge. What's the most underestimated part of outbound sales today?
Most underestimated part about outbound sales: just pick up the phone and call. I mean, that's so everyone overcomplicates things. Just pick up the phone and know who you're calling and just be yourself, and people resonate with that. I mean, the knowledge.com story. I don't know if I'll necessarily tell it right now because it's a bit of a story, but that whole deal came together because I sent an email that was a very honest email and had a phone call with somebody that led to us acquiring this super premium domain.
You started with an email though. So you're like, hey, I'd like to talk to you about this.
Yeah. So maybe that's not the best example of pick up the phone, but it's still, I think the message, let me reframe that. Don't be afraid to just make the ask, right? Like whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's email, whether it's the phone, be yourself, get out there, talk to people. Everything doesn't need a 97-step playbook with 12 touch points and, 100 rows of clay to find the right person. Just pick up the phone or send the email and build a
Well,
relationship.
knowledge helps you do that. Here's the the person that is in the market, needs the product, and matches with you. Just reach out to them.
Yeah, I mean, all of our growth I attribute to the fact that we've used knowledge for every single step of it. That's what took us from 0 to 1, and that's what took the agency to 10,000 meetings a year. Was everybody was talking to the right people.
Yeah, love that. If you had one 10x GTM channel next month, which one are you betting on? Sounds like cold calling.
Yeah, I still think cold calling is the way, and I think the more that channels get flooded with like fake personalization, the more people are going to look towards the phone. It will be interesting.
I don't even answer the phone anymore. I don't think anybody does anywhere, right? And everybody's BYOD. So really, you almost have to cold email them, but you have to do it in an authentic, personalized way, right?
So I actually think the personalizing tools hurt outbound, because I would rather get no personalization than another email that says, I see you're in New York. Do you go to Central Park often? Right? Like that fake personalization is worse. Just be direct. Just tell me, what are you trying to tell me?
How about that Central Park? It's really big, right?
Constantly.
You should go check out Central Park.
I answer cold emails all the time. If it catches my attention, I'll send an email back.
I answer cold emails. Yeah. But it has to be well thought out,
The one thing I'll say about outbound, like cold outbound on the phone, is that in tech, we tend to live in the tech bubble. Outside of the tech bubble, like AI adoption outside of the tech bubble is 7%. I don't know many people in tech that don't use AI, but outside of AI, the adoption is much, much, much lower. Like my mom called me a couple of weeks ago and was excited. She goes, "Oh, I used AI. I was on Spotify." And I'm like, "Oh, cool." But that's her idea of using AI.
It predicted a song for me. It made a list for me.
Exactly.
Cool, Mom.
So where, you're likely not going to get like a VP of sales to pick up their cell phone. But if you're selling something that's not technology based, lots of people still answer their phones. So it's really, we need to take pause, I think, in tech and realize that we're just one piece of the global economy. I mean, it's the reason I think there's such a use case in finance for knowledge. Like those guys are still taking people out to golf courses and, taking the guy and his wife out to dinner. And it's just not, they answer their phones all the time because they're not bombarded, because nobody uses that type of tech in that space.
So what percentage of sales teams out there are flying blind on buyer intent?
I think the overwhelming majority, it depends how you define intent. I think if you're an enterprise company and you see certain individuals engaging with certain content and they're part of a buying committee, awesome. But for the 95% of companies and sales teams that aren't at those massive enterprise companies that win by default, I think they're largely flying blind. They're relying on clickstream data, which is notoriously unreliable, tools that promise the world and underdeliver. And I think it's a massive problem in this space of just not knowing who to reach out to. We've gotten to the point where it's like, oh, you have 2% click-through rate. Congratulations, what a successful campaign.
Yeah, but that means that you wasted 98% of those emails. And that means 98% of the people, maybe not everybody opened it, but some high percentage, you just stole people's time. This was always my problem when I worked in ad tech. I was like, oh yeah, we're looking at 150 billion bid requests a day, and we're using AI to optimize to show you the best ads. I actually calculated this at one point. I think I wrote a tweet on it or blog post. It's like 10 years ago. I was like, actually, if our ads are 5 times more effective, across this many billion ads, and that's, let's just say you consider an ad for 1 or 2 seconds. I'm literally saving lives every day. This is how I was like justifying it in my head back then.
By time wasted on thinking about ads that weren't a fit.
Yeah. Just the toaster ad in Europe that you just mentioned, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It ties back to that relevance conversation.
Yeah, but like, here's a food walking tour in Rome that you should go check out. Oh, cool! Like I'm in Rome right now, and I love food walking tours. How'd you know that?
Yeah, when the relevance is there, I don't think people mind the interruption. It's the same thing with the emails. Like that's
why Instagram ads have been so effective, right? Because Facebook has so much data on you, and they can just show you like I remember when I was overweight, they were showing me T-shirts to make me look skinnier. I was like, yeah, cool.
Yeah, it's terrifying. I often hear the story. My buddy Matt, one of the best guys, Matt at Optio, I'll give him a shout out. Matt makes the best decks you'll ever see in your entire life. His pitch decks are incredible. He teaches VC at the University of Texas. An awesome guy. But he and I talk all the time. He's like, he's really into fitness and working out. And he's like, I'm married. I don't look at women on Instagram. So when I scroll through, I'll scroll past the, half naked influencer. But then I stop and I see the jacked guy. I'm like, oh, I wonder what his workout routine is. Now he gets ads for every Pride fair that they have and he's married to a woman. And it's because he's triggered the algorithms because he spends so much time looking at these like male models that an algorithm somewhere has put him in the box that that's probably his dating preference. So it's really wild how the algorithms don't always get it right. But
Yeah, you can
yeah,
get
no,
kind of, I call it, yeah, there's this concept of drift in the data, because I build a lot of data science tools in my day, and we would constantly wrestle with this as you're making new models. Like, what's the cutoff point? When do you kind of there's a decay function here that you have to kind of build into the system. It's kind of how the YouTube algorithm works. You know how like you start watching YouTube, and I'm like, we're habitual YouTube watchers in this house, and you kind of start off and you're like in a sports mood, and so you start clicking on the NBA stuff, and then it kind of like it refreshes and it's more and more NBA stuff, and it refreshes, it's more and more. It'll take you all the way down into that rabbit hole. But then if I stop clicking on it, there's a decay function, and it'll slowly not recommend that anymore. Anyway, so eventually, you won't think your buddy's gay.
he doesn't mind because he's like, what's crazy is the content's like really relevant because I always want to know about like what these influencers, what their workout routines are. But it's just funny when he started getting like a bunch of ads and stuff like that.
That's
But
funny.
it's like the TikTok algorithm. Like I never got into TikTok, but
No, me
I
neither.
scrolled through it a couple of times, and like you feel it pulling on your brain. A half a second delay that you look at something more than something else, and you're just being fed that type of content until you're lost. So it really shows like the power of the algorithms. I think there's a level of responsibility that comes with that too. I know you know Eric Ries, who wrote the Lean Startup. Eric's on our board. He was on my board at inception. And
I
Eric was
didn't
the
know that.
first. Oh yeah, Eric's on my board. Eric
Yeah.
was the first person who ever said what we were building could be dangerous, and he was so like set on you have to build the appropriate guardrails in place because this in the wrong hands is wildly powerful. So because of that, we've blacklisted so much data and websites and things that like, the average person wouldn't want somebody to know about them. And we've been hyper focused on compliance. But yeah, I think there's ultimately a responsibility that comes with it because the algorithms have got it.
So if I was to log into your platform and start using it, is there a particular set of data points, psychographic data points that are most predictive, or is it kind of spread out depending on the person?
So it's all contextual. So it depends on the person. It depends on you and your selling style. So the ideal customer for you and me could be different, even if we're both selling the exact same product, because it's going to be who resonates better, and because there are so many data points, everything is contextual based upon everything else. So in some things, certain variables will be more indicative than in others.
Looking out 10 years from now, what will knowledge be known for?
I think knowledge will be known as the foundational infrastructure piece powering whatever communication platforms are being used. The ability to understand people and understand people's wants and needs is wildly powerful, and I think always will be. And I think it's really awesome to think that there are use cases for what we've built that we haven't been able to conceptualize yet. And I think that's awesome. I don't know what it looks like, but I know that knowledge sits as like a core part of the base.
Minority Report knowledge. No, I'm joking. This has been great. I always loved catching up with you. Where can people find you online?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Knowledge.com is the easiest place. We do have the coolest domain ever. Next time I'm on, I'll have to tell the story. But yeah, you can find me. It's Chris ANZ19 on LinkedIn, or just put in Chris and Knowledge, and I'm the only one that pops up.
All right. Thanks so much for coming on, Chris.
Thanks for having me, Brian. Really enjoyed it.